And good morning, world. It is Thursday the 12th of October 2020, and this is a redo of the video I tried to post yesterday where I had really weird tech problems. It was one of those days yesterday. Right, so we're at the end of Jupiter conjunct Pluto. This is going to be quite a long video, so go and get yourself a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and sit down and enjoy. Let's look at Jupiter Pluto first of all in terms of a mythology. If we go back to ancient astrological myth, and no one knows where astrology started. I mean, most astrological myth in the Western world today is derived from the Greek myths. But the Greeks got it from the Minoans, who got it from the Egyptians, who got it from the Babylonians, the Chaldeans, and they got it from the Sumerians, which is the oldest known culture according to modern historians. They talk about being winged white beings from the north called the Anunnaki, of whom one of them was very much around astrology. And really astrology goes back to the times when Homo sapiens got off its knuckles in the East African desert and looked up at the star and went, oh wow, look at those moving lights. Don't understand that, let's make stories. And that's the origin of astrology. Fast forward a couple of million years. If you go back to the ancient Greek myths, the origins of humanity are lost in the dawn of time. And it's part of human culture and human being to investigate the source of our origins. But according to Greek astrological myth, the origins are founded with three beings. There's the Aum, the faceless one, the indiscernible, the universe, if you like. There's Uranus, which is Uranus with an O in front of it, which was the sky god. And there's Gaia, the earth goddess. And according to most forms of the Greek myths, don't even get me started on Robert Graves, Uranus and Gaia mated, and they gave birth to a great number of beings, all collectively known as the Titans. Some of these were really downright ugly. There was Cyclops, a single-eyed being. There was the Hesperides. There was Medusa. There was Hydra. There was also Kronos, who in Greek was called Kronos, but in Roman became Saturn. And Kronos is the derivative of the word from which we get chronometer, timepiece. So Saturn is old father time. And Saturn got really hacked off with his father, Uranus, trying to dominate the place. So Saturn, Kronos, castrated his father. And Saturn took over running planet Earth and all its beings. Saturn then mated with his sister, Rhea, a number of times, but he was so terrified that his children would usurp him, as he did his father, that he ate all of his children. Rhea, his wife, got really hacked off of this, and come the sixth child, Zeus, Jupiter in the Roman, Rhea substituted Zeus with a hot stone which Kronos ate, thinking it was his son. So Zeus grew up outside of his father's belly, and in time he rebelled against his father's rule, sliced open his abdomen and released his brothers and sisters. Hestia stroke Vesta, Demeter stroke Ceres, and Juno stroke Hera. He also released his two other brothers, Poseidon stroke Neptune and Hades stroke Pluto. At this point, which is a kind of metaphor for the downfall of the matriarchy and the rise of the patriarchy, the women, Ceres, Vesta, Juno, Hera, Hestia, Demeter, kind of get written out of history, only to re-emerge astrologically in the last 20-30 years as major asteroids, and now a very important part of astrology. But the brothers split the firmament between them. Pluto stroke Hades took the underworld. Poseidon stroke Neptune took the water world. And Jupiter stroke Zeus took the overworld. So Jupiter and Pluto are brothers, but they're completely equal and opposite. They are the two strongest influences in the sky, although their father, Saturn, would disagree, but he was disemboweled by his son. After the revolution, after the war between the Olympians and the Titans, which the Olympians won, the Titans were then thrown into Tartarus or Hades, where they probably still reside. Jupiter and Pluto are equal and opposite. They're the biggest and the smallest of the planets. They're the darkest and the brightest. They're the nearest in terms of big planets and the furthest. Pluto rules the psychology, the deep, the dark, the purging, the detoxing. And it can be manipulative, coercive. It can be obsessive and compulsive and intense and extreme, but it can also be transformative, regenerative and rebirthing. People with strong Plutos make great private detectives or psychological counsellors or forensic accountants or anything that involves the word forensic and psychology. They also make very good criminals and quite good paranoid victims. Jupiter is about growth and expansion, optimism, hope, humour. And of course, it's about going over the top, larger than life, mountains made out of molehills. Jupiter's a gas giant. It's got no substance. You can't land on it. But you can feel it. You can hear it on the radio. Jupiter's about philosophy, faith, belief, humour. That's why it rules Sagittarius. As Pluto rules Scorpio, right next to each other, equal and opposite. Jupiter conjuncts Pluto about every 12.5 to 13 years. Jupiter's orbit is regular, 11.9 years. Pluto's orbit is irregular. It's got a 248-year orbit, but it's shaped like a pear, which is why it spends 29-30 years in Taurus, but only 11 years in Scorpio. But the Jupiter and Pluto and Saturn together in Capricorn in 2020 hasn't happened for thousands and thousands of years, and it won't happen again for thousands and thousands of years. 2020 truly has been a one-off situation. And Saturn conjunct Pluto in January 2020 was a launch point and the sort of forced opening of the door to make humanity in general face up to a lot of problems that have been swept under the carpet for years and years in the past. Bearing in mind, Capricorn is a sign of world government. It deals with the way we govern ourselves through nations, communities, corporations. It's also around self-governance, the structures and boundaries we bring into our lives. Jupiter conjuncted Pluto for the first time in March 2020, at the time that COVID hit. Now, as we speak, Jupiter conjuncts Pluto for the final time in the next 24 hours, just as COVID is beginning to dissipate. Now, my heart goes out to the million strong people who have died because of COVID, and don't start emailing me saying, but it was just the flu or COVID's an imagination. No, it's bloody not. Because if you need evidence, just go and talk to your local people down the hospital. They'll tell you. And when you look at death rates over a course of years, let's use Britain as an example. If you look at the death rate graphs over the last, say, 10, 20 years, it follows a regular cycle. This year, something like 75,000 more people have died in Britain than is normal over this year, over the last 20 years. That is COVID related. Jupiter conjunct Pluto in Capricorn has represented the COVID epidemic in many ways. And now Jupiter's finishing with Pluto just as a virus is coming to both the peak of its powers and the inevitable decline. I've been saying for weeks, if not months, that COVID is not going to be such a big issue in 2021, and I still say this. I've also been saying in videos that go back to both 2015 and 2017, and a number of you have talked to me about this, around how I did a video a few years ago about November 2017 and the Grand Conjunction, and here we are right in the thick of it. I suggest that with Jupiter conjunct Pluto now, we're seeing a massive spike worldwide in COVID infections. The numbers are rocketing up, but the numbers of people dying are rocketing down. And that's not because we've got the vaccine. It's because people are paying more attention to social distancing, quarantining, healthy diet and nutrition, positive mental attitude, and because the virus does seem to be weakening. Numbers are up, deaths are down. And if that trend continues, then by the time we're into February, March of next year, COVID will be just the same as, not the same as, but parallel with the flu virus or the common cold virus, just another coronavirus. But then we have to ask ourselves, what lessons have we learnt from this? Are we going to go back to just being the same? Back to eating burgers and coffees from multi-corporate chains who devastate the planet for profit? Are we going to go back to Big Pharma and the agrochemical merchants and the arms manufacturers and polluting our skies with aeroplanes? Yes, probably. Will we learn from these lessons? Many of us will, but collectively, I don't know, because profit and money and greed is still an endemic feature of our society. And if we don't learn these lessons, then the next virus will be 5 times worse. And it won't take too long before it's here, like 5 to 10 years. So Jupiter conjunct Pluto as we speak at the end is giving a final surge of coronavirus. And I do suggest that from an astrological perspective, the more we get into mid-December onwards, we should see a notable decrease in the number of cases. And certainly as we get into the new year, coronavirus is going to be decreasing. And I'm prepared to sort of stick my neck out on this one because I genuinely believe it to be true. I've been saying this for a year. But it's not just the virus. Jupiter conjunct Pluto in the sign of world government. It's created behemoths. It's created monsters, mountains out of molehills, people blowing things completely out of proportion. It's created the over-the-top, larger-than-life figures who run the world, whether it's India and Australia, whether it's China, America, whether it's the UK, Brazil. It seems that there's a lot of bluster. There's a lot of people out there trying to grab the power, grab the attention and blame everyone and everything else for anything that's not their responsibility and none of it's their fault, of course. And let's face it, blame is the negative form of what would otherwise be conscious self-responsibility. Blame is the single most negative, one of the 2 most negative attributes we as humans have when we blame someone or something else for our misfortunes when we are actually responsible for ourselves. The other one is obviously guilt. Just as Jupiter conjuncts Pluto for the final time, so it seems that world politics in recent months has really escalated to a point where everyone's been on tenterhooks. And now it seems as if the bubble is bursting. And things are beginning to show signs of coming back down to earth. This would be lovely. And I expect this to happen. But if you need guidance on this, look at it in a more fine-tuning way from an astrological perspective. The Mercury retrograde of this last 6 weeks, which concluded on November the 3rd, the date of the American election, it is shortly going to clear its retrograde shadow period. This will happen in the next 48 hours. So we're going to be able to look back on this last 6 to 8 weeks during Mercury retrograde shadow, Mercury retrograde post shadow, and say, okay, what's been going on? Have we been crazy? Has this been real? Mars is about to stop going retrograde in the next 48, 72 hours. Mars has been retrograde since early September. Also, very shortly, in the next 48 hours, 48 hours-ish, we're going to see the new moon. I woke up this morning at 6 a.m. and I saw the faintest sliver of the new moon. It was beautiful. It's going to be exactly new in about 2 days' time. And this is going to bring a whole fresh start. The new moon is taking place at 23 degrees of Scorpio, ruled by Pluto. And it's going to be precisely sextiling both Jupiter and Pluto. So this is the windows of opportunity for fresh starts and new beginnings. This doesn't mean that there's going to be lots of new developments and actions in the short term. It does mean that there's lots of new fishing lines being thrown into the future, lots of seeds being planted at this time, and over the next couple of months we're going to see a lot of germinations. The new moon in a month's time is a total eclipse of the sun at 23 degrees Sagittarius, not on galactic centre but close enough to it to have an influence. And the new moon on the 13th of January, 1 week before the American inauguration, is precisely conjunct Pluto. And this suggests to me that we're heading into a 2-month period of major culling, of endings and new beginnings, of metaphorical death and rebirth. And there's every indication that as we get into mid-January onwards, there's a lot of fresh starts and new beginnings in ways that we can't even see clearly yet. But one of the benefits of being an astrologer is I deal with 25 clients a week in, week out. And when you see that many people, then you recognise patterns of development. And in the majority of people, like 75–80% of the people I'm dealing with, they all seem to show that by the time we're into mid-February 2021, the hardest time of 2021 is over. Now, I'm only reporting what I'm seeing in the astrological patterns in other people's charts, but the majority of people suggest that we're going to have an easier time next year. Of course, all of next year, Saturn will square Uranus, which is going to necessitate the bringing of structure into the more chaotic sides of the world, whilst at the same time revolutionising the old structures and revolutionising our limitations, changing the boundaries from concrete and steel into rubber and elastic, and bending the rules, not breaking them. But that's going to be tame compared to 2020. So at this time, today, tomorrow, the next day, with this new moon in Scorpio, we're seeing the start of the new beginnings. And as we get into January, mid-January 2021, we're going to see this turn into actions which are going to hopefully seed a new future, which is going to be far less concerned around profit, greed, corporate excess, chemtrails, pollution of the planet, because we can't live without this planet, and hopefully just a little bit more around old-fashioned values such as dignity, morality, authenticity and integrity, which has been in short supply amongst our leaders collectively over this last year. It comes to something when we look to our nursing staff, our police officers, the dustmen, the rubbish collectors, as bastions of community to whom we look to and respect more than our leaders. Time for a fresh start, and in months and years to come we'll look back and go, yes, this was seeded in mid-November. I don't want to get too hopeful, but I'm feeling more positive about the world situation now than I have done at any time this year so far. On that note, I'll get going. I'm going to post another video shortly, and it's nothing to do with me. It's not mine. It's from friends of mine who I'm very proud to support. A little thing from a group of people called Seize the Day. So if you see something new coming on my website that's not from me, I've not been hacked. All right, world. Catch you later. Bye.